Welcome, Walnut. I'm Lara, but you can call me Laz, your host for Walnut Wednesday. This is your reminder to be brave, be yourself, and know that you can make the world a better place just by what you decide today. Here, I'm going to share my weekly walnuttings with you on a Wednesday. Hey Walnut, it is me, Laz, here for another episode of Walnut Wednesday, and this week I'm very excited to introduce a friend of a friend, but now we're friends, Cloe Willetts. Welcome, Chloe.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I've been following you for the 3 years that you've been doing this, and I think it's amazing. So I was stoked when you reached out.
Oh, it's been really cool because Walnut, like I said, Chloe and I know each other through lots of all our friends through a couple of different people, but it was actually Sophie Bell who was like, oh, and if you need someone to interview, you should definitely check out this girl called Cloe Willetts. And I was like, I know her, small world. So yeah, it just worked out really, really well. And obviously we've been at a couple of social occasions where we've had the odd wine or two and things like that. So it's nice to have someone local to me as well on the podcast too. So yeah, just welcome, Chloe. I'm so excited.
Oh, thank you.
Walnut, so Chloe is like predominantly you speak to, I'll get you to introduce yourself in a second, but one thing that I think would be a really cool topic to dive into is sensitivity, and you bring that into your job a lot. So yeah, before we jump in, why don't you introduce yourself to the walnuts that are listening today?
Okay, so yeah, I'm Chloe. I'm a mum of one. I've got a daughter called Hazel and she's 10. I've been a solo mum most of her life, so it's just been us two, but we've got such a close bond, and so that's been, it's amazing. I'm also a journalist. I've been a journalist for about 10 years, and I'm also a children's writer, so I've written and self-published 2 kids books, using that sensitivity that you mentioned to weave it into the plot. So I've got one on big feelings, and it has tools for emotional regulation weaved through the plot, and then one about loss and grief. So I was a newspaper journalist for 5 years, and then I jumped into magazines because it was what I always wanted to do, write about people and get to know their stories, because I find people so fascinating.
I love that. And that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about your actual job when you were doing magazine writing, because I remember I saw articles that you had, I think you maybe posted them or something, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've never known a journalist before. So I'm just like pick your brain about that as well.
Yes, no, definitely.
Let's just start on the topic of sensitivity in general, because I personally live my life as a sensitive sausage. Yes. I'm a big feeler of feelings, and I have extremely high levels of empathy. And I think sometimes when you walk around and you just feel so many feelings, particularly on behalf of other people, sometimes it actually feels really lonely and
exhausting.
Exhausting, and things just feel hard, and a lot of the time people don't get it. I think it's only a small percentage of the population that actually has that open feelingness. So do you want to speak to how it's felt for you being an also fellow sensitive sausage living in this big wide world?
Yeah. Oh wow, where to start? Honestly, I'll give you an example. As a child, I was the one in my bedroom literally writing pages of poetry for fun, like about all these feelings. And I was content, I was happy. It felt just how it was meant to be. In hindsight, it was probably a lot of feelings for a little kid.
Yeah.
But I'm just lucky that I was able to get it out through poetry. I literally remember my first boyfriend. I would have been like 11. And when we broke up, I wrote like pages of poetry about my heartbreak. I was so heartbroken. And it's so funny. I wish I still had that notebook, but I don't. But it's also been really hard, and not knowing what that sensitivity was and the empathy until a few years ago. It's obviously with it has come a lot of depression and anxiety as well, because I do feel everything so intensely.
Yeah.
But also feelings weren't really something that I ever talked about when I was growing up, as a lot of us haven't, because of just the way that our generation has been taught. And also social anxiety or shyness. Like, well, I don't actually think it's shyness, but I withdraw and I observe if I'm not entirely sure or comfortable, or if it's a lot to take in and I'm a little bit overwhelmed. And so that's been seen as shyness. And then I felt really bad about that, because I've always been taught that being shy is not the way you should be. Like, you need to be confident and extrovert and light up a room. And so essentially a lot of who I was, I felt like it was a bad thing, or feeling that I was too much, or not being able, as you said, to express that you feel so much. And it is really lonely, eh? But then with that comes my ability to interview people and connect with them, and just in a way that I'm so grateful for, and being able to write in the way that I do. So, and being a good mum, because I'm really in tune with Hazel and we talk a lot about emotions. So there are sides of it that I now embrace, but it actually took writing my kids' book for me to do a lot of healing. I wrote that kids' book for me as a child, to kind of teach sensitive kids that it's like the last sentence is it's really rather special when there's magic in your heart. So if I had this book when I was little, I think it would have changed a lot of how I viewed myself growing up. And there's tools, because I obviously experienced anger as well because I was so frustrated. I didn't understand, kids express pent up emotions as anger, and little girls aren't meant to be angry, like there's something wrong with you. So I think it was just this societal conditioning of who I felt like who I wasn't good enough, or so that's why the book, I was literally sitting on my bed writing the book, bawling my eyes out, because I was like,
oh, got tears in my eyes.
It was really healing. But and so it has been hard. It's interesting that you said lonely, because I remember someone saying to me, you have such a good life, like you've never had any extreme childhood trauma or anything. I don't understand why you can get low, or why but it is you do feel a little bit lonely, like no one quite gets you. So that's interesting. But so it was really healing writing that kids' book, and I just knowing that might help sensitive kids to feel seen, and that that it's special that they feel so much, was really healing for me as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I resonate so much with your story about nothing particularly traumatizing, like my life is relatively happy, but growing up, and especially through those when you're becoming a teenager, or just even before that, you're just discovering that it's weird that someone behaves that way and doesn't care when you care so much about something. And it's hard to even regulate that as a feeling when you're little, and you just get shown all these examples, and then it builds up and leads to half my life being a recovering people pleaser, and just trying to make sure that everyone in the room is okay, and me just feeling stressed all the time. And on the outside it looks like I'm a happy, content, bubbly, like you said, light up the room, loud person, but on the inside I'm actually very stressed, and I've got anxiety, because I want it to make sure everyone around me is okay. And it's it's weird. It's weird when you feel on the inside and it's not projecting quite correctly outwardly. And I think that is because of when you're little and you don't know, or you're not shown or understanding why things are happening around you. So I think it's actually really beautiful that you've written a book like that to help our little wee ones that are feelers and sensitive sausages like us, to navigate through that, and also healing, doing a little bit of inner child work and loving up on younger Chloe, who also just didn't get that.
Yes, inner child work, that's so fascinating. I've really been looking into that the past couple of years as well, and it's so true. And people, adults that buy these books, I also subtly wanted to when they read it to their kids, or for them to get that message too. And some adults have said that it was really, it hit them, and that that it helped them as well. So that was amazing too. And as you see, that would be the inner child stuff, of it can be quite detrimental not being seen as a child, or understood.
And
so
it reminds me, Oh, sorry to interrupt, Chloe, but my friend of mine gave me this book. She's like, there's this book. Is when I first started Walnut Wednesday. She's like, there's this book you need to have. And I was like, what is it? And it's The Boy, the Fox, and the Mole, or the Horse.
I've got that on my coffee table.
Oh my God, me too. And
That's amazing, eh?
she was like, gave it to me, and we're in a cafe, we're having coffee, we're having a meeting over something. And she's my friend and like my work wife at the time. And she's like, just sit down and read it. I was like, what do you mean? It's like this fat book. Like, she's like, just read it. It's a kid's book. You'll read it quickly. I read it in like 10 minutes, and I was sitting in this cafe and I was just crying.
Oh,
I was just crying and crying and crying. And that's what I imagine. I mean, I haven't read your books yet, but when I look at like the pictures and the meaning behind it, like on your Instagram feed and stuff, I feel that, like, it reminds me of that kind of book where it's like, it is for children and it's got like the pictures and stuff meant for that, but there's actually like a little bit of soul underneath the story that like is just simmering beneath the surface, ready for like someone at our age to be like, oh, in my feelings.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that's so true. Like with the empath or being an empathetic person thing, you can tell when someone else who's empathetic has written something or done a piece of art or something that's really deeper, you feel that as well. So with that, and it's like if you see something beautiful like a sunset, we appreciate these things so much more than some people might as well. So there's that counteractive side. But yeah, that's so funny. I bought that book for Hazel, and then I ended up loving it so much that it's on our coffee table. He's such a special man. Have you seen his social media?
Yes, obsessed. Love it.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. I love so Walnut is a staple book that you must have in your household, because I think it, it's one of those ones that you could just like flip to any page and like feel a feeling. So Chloe, you spoke to like writing and self-publishing your book. I'd actually like to talk about self-publishing actually if we have time, but as a part of your healing journey, like, can you please talk me through what it felt like to use, like, where did that idea come from to first of all create a book? And then I'd like to know like how it felt having that place to sort of express yourself into.
Gosh, I don't even know how I'll explain it in words. It felt amazing. So I wanted to write this book since I was a teenager. I just, not this one particularly knowing what I was going to write, but I knew that I wanted to write a kid's book for deep feeling, just for kids like me. I didn't even realize it was deep feeling. I just knew I needed to do it, like, since I was a teenager. And then, so I was working full time at the magazine in Auckland, and then in the first week of lockdown, we all got made redundant because the magazine company shut down. And so I had moved up to Auckland with just my daughter. We didn't have any family, so it was a pretty intense week. But I'd also been considering freelancing to come back to Kapiti because Hazel missed our family. So then that just happened, and then freelancing meant that I could essentially work less hours but make actually better money. So then I had more time to do what I actually wanted to do, and that was to write the book. And I've been saying it for years, and my friends were like, you have to do it. How will you feel if you don't do it? Like, even just for your own sake. And so I did it. I wrote it, having that time from COVID, luckily. And I think COVID also gave us that shift of really reflecting on what it is we want from our lives, eh? Yeah. And so I really wanted to do this, and so I did it. And then I just put it up on Facebook that I wanted to write this kids book for sensitive kids, and if anyone wanted to support me by pre-ordering. And then I got like over 100 pre-orders just from family and friends wanting to support me. And then so I was like, well, that's cool, at least I'm getting it out there and I've done it, and that's a tick off the bucket list. And then it did well, and then and it felt amazing. Like, it felt like this weight had come off, and obviously I felt like I connected to who I was a lot more. Like, I found a lot more myself after. And it also felt amazing having people message to say that their kids were saying, hey, I'm Zozo, which is the main character, that's me, and feeling and like wanting to read the book every night and just loving it. And so obviously feeling understood and seen, that meant so much. And then the second book just kind of happened. Do you want me to talk about that one?
I wrote down so I don't forget to talk about the grief one as well. So please go into it.
And so then so that was in, so when did I release the last book? November last year. I think I released it in November last year. And then the second book happened in January this year, because I was interviewing a woman called Emma Blundell, who I knew from Kapiti, and she had terminal breast cancer, and she was doing a fundraiser for her nephew, and to fundraise for a pool for him because he's got muscular dystrophy, and that was one of her dying wishes was to leave that for him. And another one of her wishes was she asked me if I would write a kid's book about loss and grief for when she's gone, to leave behind for her stepdaughter Jessa, because Jessa has the first book and loved it. And so she wanted it in the same characters, and she was adamant that she wanted to commission my illustrator so that we could do it. Because obviously with self-publishing, I have to fund my illustrator, Fabian, who's amazing, and everything, the printing. So I was like, okay, well, you're not going to say no to that, no way. Now I went home that night, and because I sat and talked with her about what death meant to her, because she was quite spiritual, and so she wasn't scared of dying. She was actually at peace. And so again, with that, the empathy part of it, I was able to feel how she was feeling. And so I used that to write the book, and the book has that feeling of peace and like comfort through it.
Yeah.
I went home that night and wrote it because I wanted her to see it, and I knew that she didn't have long. And then I emailed it to her husband, Hamish, and he was crying, which was like, oh, well, that's a good sign. In a sad way. And she loved it. And and then she passed away 3 days later, and I read it at her daughter, Willow, who's 22, loved it and read it at her funeral.
Chloe, I can't. Well, no, you're not watching this. I'm literally crying. Like,
I know, it's an intense story. And which was so special. And then my illustrator, she's honestly so amazing. Like, she captures all the emotion in the eye. She's sensitive as well. She's actually the one that gave me the book on the highly sensitive person by, oh my gosh, I'm having a mind blank. I'll call it COVID brain. Elaine. Anyway, we can put it in there. But so she did the illustrations in a month, and then we got the book out, and then the project picked up the story. Because obviously it's a beautiful story. Emma's left behind this amazing book that's helping other families with grief. And then the project picked up the story, and then the book, so lots of people got to see it, and so then it took off a lot, and so the books have been doing pretty well, which is amazing. And we just sell online mainly. Like, I sell to some bookshops, but as a self-published author, bookshops take 40%. So to be able to save to release another book, it's more profitable to sell online. But so that's the story.
oh my gosh, congratulations. I just think you've done such an amazing job for such beautiful reasons, and I love the story about the second book. Oh my god, I can't even talk, I'm getting emotional. I love the story of the second book. It's like a beautiful like legacy piece, as well as like just helping young people navigate through big feelings.
Yeah, look, we've got a page that's dedicated to Emma, so that's special. So every single family that buys it, like, everyone sees that that it's inspired by her. But one of the cool things is it was nice being able to weave my spirituality into it as well, because that's one thing that I was always feeling a lot like that when I was little, but it was always like, no, that's not true, kind of thing. So that was another thing I had to work through. But it was nice because we've put in here about your loved ones coming back as like nature, like as butterflies and shooting stars and stuff like that. And that has been the part that has comforted kids the most, and adults as well. And being able to put that in like felt really empowering as well. Like, I've essentially put all of myself into these books, and to have held back on so much of myself for so long, and now just be kind of like, it feels freeing to be able to do that, and at the same time be helping others. So it's been pretty amazing.
I love this. I love this. And I feel like it's kind of like I feel similarly with like with writing my book and even starting this podcast. It's like I just wanted to do it for myself. I wanted to do it as a self challenge, as a not even a challenge. I just felt in my body like I want to do this for me. And in turn, the ripple effect of it is like the extra icing on the cake, right? Is that little extra treat and special reward, but it's the satisfaction for me, myself, of doing those things that like makes it more like empowering, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I'd
Yeah.
love to know, like, in terms of the courage that it takes to actually self-publish something, being someone who's been on the butt end of it and the whole journey it takes through like actually writing something and pouring your like whole essence and soul and heart into a physical thing for people to kind of take on. Tell me how that felt for you to make that decision to like, I'm gonna be an author.
Well, ever since I was little, I was like, I'm gonna be no matter what. Like, I just wouldn't have it any other way. But it was terrifying, honestly, because what's the term? Oh my gosh, honestly, I'm having a mind blank again. What's the term when you don't feel like you deserve it? Oh, I'm having that.
Now I'm having it. It's on the tip of my tongue as well. I'm like,
oh, you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean.
I'm going to blame COVID, my COVID brain for this.
Anyway,
yeah. So it's I was terrified. I was like, what if it's crap and it doesn't do well? And it's I just
imposter syndrome.
That's the one.
I
have huge imposter syndrome, and I always do. And I don't. Yeah, that's something that I don't know. I try to work on, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, it is what it is. But I was terrified, and I always am. Every time I get a review, I'm like, oh, what if someone gives me a crap review? But because it is such a special part of you, and it does mean so much that if people are horrible, then you feel shit. But actually, the reviews have been great anyway, and it shouldn't matter anyway because it's if I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
But there was one man that commented on an ad on the first book on Facebook, an old stale pale male from down south, as we call them. And he said that my books would make kids soft. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, you must be so unhappy if you have to write on a kid's book post to say that. Like, who does that? You must be so sad inside. And then I joked to my illustrator, oh, we should write a kid's book about trolls and how they're only assholes because they're unhappy. And then we were like, oh my god, that's actually a really good idea. So our next book is on bullying, and it has a troll, and the moral is he's only an asshole because he's unhappy inside. And then the Dizzy Waggles teach him to look for the good in himself, not the bad, so then he's happier. So so anyway, I don't even know how that went off on a tangent, but so that's the next book.
So many little lessons that you can take on from just small snippets of life, right, that will create something so beautiful and helpful for people, like all people, ages, everything. I love that.
But it is terrifying. Sorry, it is terrifying, self-publishing,
I wanted to sort of how did you navigate through feeling like, I call it scare-sided, when I always get this like butt fire when I know I'm going to do something that's like a walnutting and I'm going to be really brave and scary. I call it scare-sided because I'm scared and excited at the same time, because of that psychology of how it, like, you know, nervousness and excitement do the same like physical thing in your body. So I call it scare-sided because it's a fusion of both. But
I love that.
I wonder, how did you sort of navigate yourself through actually going to the end and completing it and doing it, like, rather than just having the idea and going, oh, that would be cool, one day actually doing it?
Just having to trust myself and trust the process. You're so right, it's being brave, like, I just thought, well, I want to do it. If I don't do it, I'm gonna regret it. Just backing myself. You have to back yourself. And also I had the support of loved ones being like, which always helps. But I guess I just knew that I'd feel worse having never at least tried it.
Yeah. But what I think like is really interesting is, I think us little sensey souls that have that imposter syndrome and have all these like, oh, what if people don't like me, are actually the bravest. Like,
Yes.
we don't walk
Yeah.
around like ignorantly, like just life falling down in front of our nose. It's actually really active inside, like to make these hard decisions and make these brave decisions. And it does sound like not a big deal to just go, oh, I'm gonna write a book, but it actually like is,
Yeah.
like
Yes. Especially when when you have felt like you're not, I don't know, you have felt down on yourself, and then to put your whole self out there, that makes it even scarier.
yeah.
Yeah. But then I realized there were so many more people like me after I did it that were like, I'm so glad you did that. And that's like when I first started being open about having anxiety years ago, people came forward and were like, I'm so glad you did that. And so I just try and remember that there are people that it'll help, and but mainly also, like, I don't want to hide behind who I am and be too scared to like do something good for the world or for myself in fear of what some people might say. So, but you're so right, it does make it a lot harder when you're constantly worrying about those types of things. And also I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so that doesn't help either. But it's all learning steps and it's all milestones, and it has helped with my growth a lot.
Yeah, I think it's also like important to start talking about these things, because what I found interesting on my Walnut journey, because similarly to you, it's like as soon as I started talking about this, I got lots of like responses being like, oh my God, same. Or, realizing that I actually am not by myself. And that's almost something that sort of kept Walnut Wednesday going in some ways, because it's like, oh, it's not just me, like I'm not alone in this. But one thing that I found really interesting is that as feelers and thinkers, we think that everything is bad, or like we always think it's going to be negative. We always go, what if like insert bad thing that's going to happen, instead of like, what if I like have a really successful book launch, or whatever. We go, oh my God, what if no one buys it? And we're first to like think of all the negative things. And I like, sometimes I get in a big mind warp about like where that started. Where did society start to like drill into you that you should always think about the worst case scenario first, just in case? It's like, I don't want to live in a just in case. And so anyway, so that's why I think it's really important.
So true. Yeah, wow. Yeah, I'm literally having to train my brain slowly to focus to think of the good things that can happen, as opposed to the bad. That's so interesting. I guess, when I was at college, I remember a teacher told me I shouldn't be a journalist, or I wouldn't be able to because I was too sensitive. And so there are those types of things that get stuck in your mind, but I'm also a little bit stubborn. So that also made me think, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. And then when I was working as the magazine journalist, I was actually so lucky. I won Lifestyle Journalist of the Year, and the judges said full sensitive journalism. And to me, that was like, oh my gosh, like, because you don't usually see journalists that are sensitive in a newsroom. Like, you're usually taught you have to be harsh and not feel anything and stuff like that. And so there's also that like kind of thing of like, fuck you, I'll show you, like that there's nothing wrong with me and it can be good.
Yeah. And it's just important side note as well, Walnut, how much like comments like that from years ago can just like right, Chloe, stick to you forever. And that was a driver for you. But on the other end of that can be really detrimental to someone not wanting to be brave because someone said that you can't do this because you're too sensitive. Yeah. I attended the summit, like a women's summit recently, and there was a speaker, and I forget her name, and I refer to her so much, but she also is like a leader in like New Zealand women's inspiringness. I'm not very good at news, but she also spoke a lot to empathy and how she uses her empathy as her strength as a leader, and not only to empower women, but just to like walk through her role, and it's something to do with like government-y things. And I just thought, it's not celebrated enough for the people that are brave enough to actually share that they feel stuff, because it's just such a common I feel like I'm going around in circles, but you know what I mean, Chloe?
Yes, no, everything you're saying is spot on. I'm fascinated. I love hearing it. It's so nice to hear it. yeah, you're so right. It isn't, yeah, it's almost like it's always been seen as a weakness to feel so much, but actually, as you mentioned, it's actually we are so strong because if you feel that much and you still can go about life fairly well, like that is actually really strong.
Yeah, like functioning, not a functioning alcoholic, what, like a functioning feeler of
Yeah,
feelings or
functioning
something.
feeler. Yes, that's so good.
um
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about like journalism and your role, and how you mentioned that it's not usually people who are sensitive and stuff, and I love that you won that award, and I just want to like congratulate you on that. But what does it feel like for you to be in like a world full of like hard ass pushers who are like, I'm going to get the answer and I'm going to do this, to be someone who's like, yeah, but I just want to know how you feel.
Yeah.
Can you just speak to that real quick?
Yeah. Well, a lot of mostly with my journalism, I've always entirely with my journalism, I've always cared about the sources. Like
Yeah.
actually the people I'm writing about, that's what it is for me. I just love telling their stories. So um yeah, I'm trying to think. That's such a good question. Um
Because I always found when, you know, particularly in my role when I was in travel, being someone who was around like the peacocks all the time, who were just
yes,
very
yeah.
loud and stuff. And as someone who, like, there were times where I would have real dread because I've behaved in a certain way to try and like replicate the peacocks, but it wasn't aligned for me.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm kind of getting at, is like, how did you kind of how do you kind of go through when there are people around you, not mirroring them and still staying true to like who you are as a
Yeah.
journalist, as a person?
That's such a good question. I have never been asked this before. I love it. I actually don't know. I sometimes, well, one thing is I cannot not be authentic. I hate small talk and superficial talk, and I'd rather just not talk.
Yeah,
So
me too.
I think sometimes I just have got to the point where I'm okay with maybe just being seen as shy or quiet or different, because people that know me know that when I'm comfortable that I'm not like that.
Yeah.
I've also learned just to let my work speak for itself, and I actually care more about what my sources, how they feel and how they think of me, than I ever cared really about people that I worked with that had the peacock mentality or whatever. Yeah, I think I just have to that's such a good question. I'm going to go and contemplate that one later.
No, I mean, I think you've answered it really well, and it's actually just a testament to like the journey that you've been on throughout your whole life of actually being okay with who you are, and that's a real hard place to actually finally get to. So I just like want to smack you on the butt for that, because I think it's really beautiful. Like and it's hard. Things are hard, and then you get to somewhere where you're like, oh my gosh, like look in the mirror, like I actually like you. Like I even love you, you know, like I want to treat you well. So yeah, I think you actually have answered that really well, but definitely go and like percolate on that. It's a good question for the walnuts in general. But before I ask you my token question, Chloe, do you have anything for a walnut listening that's on your heart that you feel like you haven't like quite raised, or something, a message for somebody, or anything to add?
I've actually been wanting to ask you more questions, and I've been wanting to say, like, honestly, what you do is amazing. The fact that you let people feel listened to and seen and heard is actually so amazing. Not many people in this world actually listen and genuinely listen and want to and make people feel like they have a space. So I hope you know that. That's honestly, yeah, there's not many people in this world that actually actively listen and care. So, I mean, there probably are, but not as many as there should be.
I'm crying again. Thank you so much. I'm obviously very
I
emotional
honestly mean that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I receive your compliment. And I'm not going to say anything else back. I just received. So thank you so much. I was going to cry some more. Right. So the token question that I ask to every guest on the podcast, Chloe, is what does being a walnut mean to you?
Yeah. I think being a walnut means being authentically yourself and being okay with that. Even if it means having to unlearn conditioning, but especially if that means having to unlearn conditioning, and even if it means being different, and especially if that means being different, because that it's so hard. Sometimes, yeah, being yourself when you've been made to feel like you have to be a certain way, and that's actually one of the bravest things you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you replicate being a walnut like so beautifully as well, and especially like you say, your work speaks for itself, like with things like that are just like giving so much love and like sending on the walnutness, the bravery, the courage to people through some beautiful words and pictures. So thank you for all you do in the world. If there's a walnut, like, I'm obsessed with this conversation, I love Chloe, I need to go snoop her and buy all her books and do all the things and look at all her articles, where can the walnuts find you?
Good question. So we've got so I've got Instagram, which is Chloe, CLOE .Willetts, WILLETTS, or I've got the Dizzy Waggle books. It might help. Should we just put it in like the
absolutely
yeah. Or thedizzywaggle.com is where you can buy the books, and it has more info on there. That's probably the easiest.
Awesome. Okay, so your Instagram and then the website for the books, which I will link in the show notes for sure, Walnut. So if you enjoyed this episode, Walnut, I would love to hear from you and hear what you think. And if you have any comments and want to speak to more of it, like, obviously I think I can speak for Chloe and myself that we welcome the conversation, we welcome your courage, and do a little screenshot and tag us on the social medias and let us know that you were here. But thank you, Walnut, for your time and for listening, and Chloe as well. Thank you for your time and your delicious bravery and all your words and all you do in the world. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was amazing.
Have a happy Walnut Wednesday, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.